What's up, guys? Long time no talk. So this video is something that many people have been requesting for a very long time, and I thought it was time I gave you this short version of my testimony. The reason I'm giving you guys this short story is when I go and speak at places, whether it's at a church or a school, and they ask me to share my testimony, my story, it can be a long story with all the details, but for the purposes of YouTube, I'm gonna keep it short. I grew up in a church. I grew up going to church. I grew up being a part of the youth program at my church, part of choir, part of the worship team, part of the youth worship band. I pretty much did everything I could within the church as a middle schooler and high school and even earlier. But that being said, just because I was doing a lot of things in the church does not necessarily mean I had a relationship with Jesus. And that was 100% true for me at the time. I was a youth leader in my church's ministry as a 15, 16, 17-year-old, but I didn't really know Jesus. I went to church because that's where all my friends were. I went to church because that's where I could get a lot of my social interaction besides diving. So growing up, I was homeschooled because I was diving all the time, which was great. And I loved being homeschooled and I loved diving all the time. But at the same time, for me to get social interaction with other people, I had to find other extracurricular activities to be a part of. And I grew up going to church, and so church for me was a place where I could play bass, I could sing, I could lead worship, I could hang out with people my age, I could play sports with other people, I could do a lot of things within the church. But at the time, I really didn't understand what the point of church was. So growing up, I heard all the stories. I knew about Abraham, I knew about Moses, I knew about Jesus, I knew about all the things that the Bible was talking about, but I didn't understand the personal aspect of it. I thought that they were just stories, and that if I got baptized, it would be like fire insurance, and that instead of going to hell when I die, I would go to heaven. And that sounds great. Everyone wants to go to heaven, right? But now, being 22 years old, I understand that heaven is not the goal. Whereas in high school, I thought, oh, if I'm just a good person and I say I believe in Jesus, that's all I gotta do to be fine, right? I was pretty wrong. So that's the background of my church history. Grew up in the church, was a part of everything that the church was doing for the high schoolers especially, and I loved it. I loved hanging out with the people there, but I cannot say that I had a personal relationship with Jesus in high school, because I didn't. It was when I was 18 years old, after my first semester, freshman year of college, that I truly began to question what I was believing, and I truly began to ask people these questions instead of just questioning things and sitting in my past belief. Two people were super influential to me in my walk with Jesus when I was first starting to understand who Jesus was, what the gospel was, because that was another confusing thing to me. I did not understand what the gospel was until I got to college. But two people that were super influential to me were David and Adam, my diving teammate who became my synchro partner at the Olympics, and my coach. And they were always willing to listen to my questions. And I grew up in the church, so they had like conversations about Christianity with me in the past, but I was super surface level because I really had no idea what was going on. And it was one day in January that I sat down with David and just began to ask him a bunch of questions, and he followed up with, okay, so like share your testimony with me, because I told him, well, I was baptized at 8, yada yada yada, all these things. And he's like, okay, cool, but like what's your testimony? How has God changed your life? How has Jesus impacted you in a way where you want nothing to do with the world and everything to do with him? And that was a question I was like, whoa, I have absolutely no idea. And it was from that moment on, I truly began to get the understanding of the gospel. David and Adam really laid out the gospel very plainly for me to understand, and for me to be able to relate to people when needed. And that was super big for me because I grew up in the church, but I didn't know what the gospel was. But for months and months and months, they just poured into me. They gave me knowledge and wisdom and just kind of mentored me through life and through college at the time. And it was in this moment that I started to begin to form a relationship with Jesus. I began to ask questions and get answers to those questions, not from people necessarily, but from the Lord himself, which to me was another weird thing. So in a sense, that's how I came to know the Lord, but a lot of this was challenged back in the year 2015. So for a lot of the end of high school, beginning of college, I struggled with a lot of depressive thoughts, a lot of anxiety, and it really took a toll on me. I was not a healthy person at the end of high school or at the beginning of college. And a lot of that stress came from not knowing my identity. A lot of that stress came from not knowing I was enough. A lot of that stress came from not knowing that I was worthy. And that's something I speak a lot about now so openly with people, is because I can really see when people are going through something hard. I have some sort of eye for when people are struggling with depression or anxiety, or just struggling to understand who they are. And that's something I can personally connect with, because the Olympics was a big thing for me. The Olympics was my dream, my goal. My goal coming into college before 2016 was, I want to go to the Olympics. I want to be an Olympian. I didn't care so much about the medal. I just wanted to be the Olympics, because I thought, well, if I go to the Olympics, like, I'll finally have something I can amount to. Having the 5 rings on my body means that, oh, like, I did it, I worked hard, and I got to this. And I had such a destructive perspective on the Olympics and on even myself, that I made the Olympics such a bigger thing than it actually is, to the point where it caused me to be depressed and full of anxiety all the time. I would spend hours and hours and hours training, but was never happy because I wasn't enjoying the sport. I was just trying to accomplish a goal that seemed huge at the time, when in reality, it's a cool thing, but it's not everything. And as I was going through all of this, I didn't tell anyone I was going through any of this, because I felt embarrassed, I felt ashamed, and I felt still like I wasn't enough even to be able to share these things with other people. Even though I was starting to form a relationship with Jesus, I was struggling with some of the hardest stuff I've ever struggled with. And that just goes to show, like, when you follow Jesus, life may not get easier. In some senses, it may get a lot harder. Your struggles may get more real. But the cool thing about that is like, you are equipping yourself to battle against those struggles. You are equipping yourself with victory. You are equipping yourself with the access to freedom. And so while I was going through this state of depression, anxiety, and stress leading up to the Olympics, trying to prove to myself and to others that I'm enough, I'm good at what I do, this is my identity, God was able to come over that. He was able to walk alongside of me in that, into the shadows, into the darkness, and pull me out of it. And he still blessed me along the way, even though I was so deep in sin and so deep in my own selfishness and my own selfish desires and my own lies about myself. He was still right there along with me, pulling me out of it at the same time. And I can look back on the year 2015 especially with healthy eyes now. 2015 was a pretty bad year. 2015 was the year I started to follow Jesus. 2015 was the year I found out my foot was broken. 2015 was the year I didn't qualify for the Olympics. 2015 was the year where I struggled with friendships. 2015 was the year where I struggled with a lot of people saying a lot of things about me that really hit home, and I don't think they realized how much damage they were doing. But through all that destruction that was going on that year, the Lord was still faithful and was still so good, and had such a sweet whisper in my ear, constantly trying to remind me that I was enough and that I was worth his price. So it was at the Olympic trials in 2016 where a lot of the things about God's nature, his character, and his love for me started to click. For me, it was a struggle to believe that God was good for a long time. It was a struggle to understand that I was loved for a long time, and that truly just stems from me not understanding the gospel, not being confident in who God says I am, whereas I was putting all my focus on what other people were saying or what other people were wanting instead of what God was saying and what God was wanting from me. And it was when I started to reject the world's view of me and started to accept God's view of me that I truly started to step into this life of freedom, into this identity of freedom, knowing that my identity was not tied to the Olympics or to an Olympic medal, but in reality, it was tied to what Jesus had already done on the cross for me. That was a big thing for me. That's what really blew my mind, is because growing up, I heard about Jesus dying on the cross week after week after week after week. It's just planted in your head. They say it all the time. But growing up, there was no talk of the struggles. There was no sense of freedom to talk about the struggles. And so when my struggles started to come in, I had no idea what to do with them. I was equipped to know of the freedom that could come from them, but I was never taught about the struggles themselves. And so when I experienced them hard. But God's good, God's faithful, He cares. The biggest thing for me especially, I remember watching a sermon in Rio where I was watching Pastor Robert Madu, who's a pastor down in Dallas, just on my computer on my little balcony overlooking the mountains of Rio. And I was sitting there and he was talking about identity. He was talking about how God wades the waters with you. He's in the midst of the struggle, but He's also in the peaceful quiet in the wilderness as well. And something that stuck out to me was he was just saying, you are loved, you are a child of God, and He is pleased with you. And it was those three phrases, that one sentence, that really rocked my world. What did I struggle with when I was at the end of high school, coming into the beginning of college? I struggled with, I am loved. I didn't know I was loved for just being me, not because I was a diver, not because I had the chance of going to the Olympics, but because I was me. I didn't realize that I was a child of God. That's where my identity lies. My identity does not lie in 5 rings that I have on my arm right here. It lies in the fact that I'm a child of God. And the last part, He is pleased with you. He is pleased with me. That's something I needed to hear because those first 2 play into that. Knowing you're loved and knowing your identity as a child of God, it serves as a reminder that He is pleased with you. Sure, you might fall into sin. Sure, you're not perfect. No one was perfect but Jesus. But He is pleased with you still. Whether I went to the Olympics or whether I got a medal or not, He was pleased with me. Whether you get that job, whether you get that career, whether you marry the right person, whether you love people around you the way you're supposed to, like God's going to grow you. God's going to move in your heart if you allow Him to reveal His nature, His word, and His character to you. And He's going to reveal to you that He is pleased with you. And so those were the big things that really transformed my life. And again, this is just the short version of the testimony. There's a lot of nitty-gritty details that I didn't go into, but the overview is I had no idea who Jesus really was. I knew about Jesus, but I didn't know who Jesus really was. And a lot of things happened, and now I know who Jesus is. I'm pursuing His heart daily. I'm pursuing the heart of the Father, and all I want to do is just praise and worship all the time. When you allow God to take hold of your life, and when you really quiet yourself and just sit in His presence, you're going to feel a difference. It truly is amazing to see who I was just 3 years ago to now. It blows my mind because I thought I had my life together, and then my life completely crumbled. And now I realize I don't have my life together at all, but God's good and God is faithful. And if I pursue Him day in, day out, that's what's going to bring joy. Anyway, you guys have been asking for a testimony video for a long time. Hope this kind of feeds that. Yeah, guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe. If you have any topics in regards to Christianity, faith, the Holy Spirit, stuff like that, leave them in the comments because I would love to just talk more about those on this channel. These are the videos I want to make. I want to make something meaningful. And while the reaction videos are fun and they're exciting, to me, I love editing them and they are just goofy, those are not really what I want to be filming. I want to be filming something that has meat on it, something that has weight to it, and I think I'm supposed to be talking about this stuff because there might be someone in the community that's struggling with something that the Lord might have put something on my heart for, and I would love to share. So if you guys have any topics, leave them down below. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video.